Hundreds of people are facing charges in connection with the events that led to the assault on the U.S. Capitol nearly a year ago. Prosecutors have called the case unprecedented in scale. So far, more than 700 people have been charged with crimes stemming from the insurrection. So Catherine Herridge spoke exclusively with the prosecutor who launched the investigation.
It was important for us to move quickly to charge a good number of cases to instill in the public that the rule of law worked.
Michael Sherwin, then the Justice Department's top prosecutor in the District of Columbia, launched the Capitol riots investigation.
Within 10 weeks, we're talking about, I think, close to 1,000 search warrants, 1,500 grand jury subpoenas, 350 to 400 arrest warrants. So just a number unseen before in any probably federal district in history.
You said that no one was off limits. Everything was on the table.
It didn't matter if you were a speaker that day, or if you were a congressman, if you were in the executive office, the president, or if you were just one of the vendors selling popcorn that day. If your conduct fit the crime, we had the evidence, you were charged.
Since that day, more than 725 defendants have been arrested, the vast majority charged with entering or remaining in a restricted federal building or grounds. About 40 defendants, including Oath Keepers, 3 Percenters, and Proud Boys, face more serious conspiracy charges. At least 5 had pleaded guilty. Sherwin told CBS News the trend lines emerged early.
This is our nation, not theirs.
The great bulk of those individuals were these one-offs. They made terrible decisions. This wasn't something that was pre-baked and planned. And then you have a sliver of cases, we'll call them militia-type cases, where there appeared to be a more collective planning.
The votes for President of the United States are as follows.
Later that day, as then Vice President Mike Pence certified the Electoral College, prosecutors mapped a legal strategy.
We initially had a command post set up that evening at the Capitol Police headquarters, where we had to set up an architecture to handle these cases because there was no roadmap.
From an FBI mobile command center, thousands of hours of social media and security camera footage collected, often reviewed minute by minute.
We set up crews to look at body-worn camera footage and videos to try to identify who those people were, identify, fix, find them, and then get arrest warrants on them.
Prosecutors say 140 police officers were assaulted that day. To date, 75 defendants have been charged.
Should the Capitol building have been locked down as a crime scene?
That would have essentially stopped the certification. So I think leadership wanted to ensure that, look, let's collect as much evidence as we can, but we have to show the public that this process hasn't been deterred.
Approximately 165 individuals have pleaded guilty, among them the so-called QAnon shaman, Adam Johnson, and Robert Scott Palmer, who pleaded guilty to assaulting officers with a dangerous weapon and was sentenced to more than 5 years in prison, the toughest sentence yet. The FBI is still asking for the public's help to identify the pipe bomber who left viable devices at the Republican and Democratic Party headquarters.
So if those devices went off, you go from a terrible situation to a terrible situation on steroids.
And another 350 believed to have committed violent acts on Capitol grounds.
So are we years out from seeing the end of these cases?
It would not surprise me if there's cases charged in 2022 or 2023.
While the Justice Department has brought a range of charges from conspiracy to obstruction, it has stopped short of sedition, which is among the most serious crimes. Tomorrow, the Attorney General will address the workforce at the Department of Justice and provide an update on their efforts to bring accountability for January 6th. Vlad, Anne-Marie?
And in fact, Catherine, that's what I was going to ask you about. You know, a lot of officials are going to be sort of making speeches to sort of mark the 1 year since the attack on the Capitol. And we want to know more about the investigation. We want to know, you know, the person you talked to mentioned, you know, didn't matter who you were, even congressmen, even members, you know, who are elected members were investigated. So are we going to get any more information about where this investigation is going?
Well, Anne-Marie, a Justice Department official told reporters that Attorney General Garland will address the workforce and he will speak very broadly about upholding the Constitution, following the letter of the law. But what we don't expect is very specific comments about individuals or cases, and I would not expect what I would describe as a traditional news conference where there are questions from reporters.
So, Catherine, as you know, federal prosecutors in Washington have charged more than 700 people with crimes in connection with the events of January 6th. Explain to the audience what are some of the charges they're facing and how many have been sentenced so far?
Well, the overwhelming majority of cases, Vlad, are what I would call trespass charges. So these are individuals who have been charged with entering and remaining in a restricted federal building or grounds. That's the Capitol. There's a smaller subset, about 40 defendants, who are facing these more serious conspiracy charges. In a nutshell, the allegation is that the government believes they have evidence that there was pre-planning and significant premeditation. About 70 individuals have been sentenced, and less than half that have gone to jail. And as I mentioned in my report, the most significant jail sentence was over 5 years for assaulting a police officer with a deadly weapon.
Michael Sherwin, talked about how unprecedented this sort of vast investigation was. What did you learn from him about the sort of matrix developed specifically for this case?
This was one of the most fascinating things to me, Anne-Marie and Vlad, the idea that they had to create a system for this unprecedented flow of cases, hundreds of cases that they were facing. And Sherwin told us that he created a matrix. And what that matrix did is it took tips, it took video information, and then it also took potentially identifiable information about the suspects, and it married it together so that they could develop what he described as prosecution packages. So to get subpoenas, to get arrest warrants, and then ultimately to bring charges against individuals. But he also emphasized that this matrix, sort of the collating of all this information, was important because as part of the legal process, the prosecution must provide all of the evidence in discovery to the defendants. So that would be all of the video, all of the tips, all of the information that led to that arrest. So they had to be highly organized at a time where they were getting cases almost like drinking from a fire hose, hundreds of potential cases they were looking at.
Catherine, the missing link in all of this is the potential pipe bomber. We heard in your piece that the FBI has been unable to identify the person who left pipe bombs near the Democratic and Republican Party headquarters. Why has it been so hard to track the suspect down? And how long are you hearing that it might take to find this person? I've seen sort of that security cam video, but so far no other concrete leads?
Well, that's right. Just for context for our viewers, the RNC and the DNC headquarters are a short walk from the Capitol. So if there had been explosions on the day of the riots or even the night before, that would have completely changed the security dynamic. Based on all of my reporting here at CBS News, I wouldn't quite say it's a cold case, but they don't have really actionable leads. And the reason that's important is because traditionally in pipe bomb cases, if you don't get some good tips early on the individuals involved, it can sometimes take years to find the suspects or suspect. Just think of the Unabomber case. That was a case that took about 2 decades for essentially a slip-up to find Ted Kaczynski. So we're looking at perhaps a challenge as great as that here with the pipe bombs. And it's important because those pipe bombs, as Sherwin said, would have really changed the dynamic of the day on January 6th. And the larger question is whether that individual was working in concert, in coordination with other people who came to the Capitol that day in an effort to shut down the Electoral College certification.
All right, Catherine Herridge, as always, stellar reporting, Catherine. Thank you very, very much. Good
You're
to
welcome.
see you. Happy New Year.
Mm-hmm.